Welcome to the inaugural Neville Gilfoy Talk on the future of entrepreneurship and innovation. Let's set the stage by acknowledging that we're at Dalhousie University, which is located in Mi'kma'ki, the ancestral and unceded territory of the Mi'kmaq. We're all treaty people. I know that some of Neville's family and friends are here in the audience, and I understand that some of you have donned a bow tie in his honor, so a very special welcome to you. Let me turn it over to Don and Jim Mills, both of who are our MBA alumni, to give the formal opening to today's event. You'll notice that while we're all used to technology, there's still some glitches even in kind of platforms like this where we've had some practice. So don't be alarmed if you have to turn up your volume a little bit to be able to hear them.
Jim and I are very pleased to welcome you to the first Neville Gilfoy Talk, and I hope that you'll enjoy this session. We know that Neville will be watching down today to see what happens.
Yeah, Don and I we're really excited that the Neville Gilfoy Talk is finally launching. It's been a bit of a journey to get here. We're very pleased about that. Neville was the entrepreneur's entrepreneur, is how I would put it.
And you know, he did so much for the business community during his lifetime. Obviously, he was the publisher of Progress, very successful magazine for many, many years in this region. He was the creator of the top 101 companies and the face-to-face conferences that he promoted to help networking in the region. And really, his focus was not just on Nova Scotia, it was all of Atlantic Canada, something that we shared with him, the interest in the region overall.
Yes, you know, Neville really believed that growing the private sector was the key to growing wealth for Atlantic Canada, and he's obviously was so correct in that regard. He's a guy that was always had ideas. He was the nonstop idea generator, is how I would put it. And every time you bumped into Neville, he was positive, energetic, and he'd be bouncing the latest thing that was on his mind in terms of what we could do next, what he could do next, and so on. He was really quite a guy.
And just on a personal note, Neville was such a great guy to be around. At times irreverent, but always funny, and just a great person to hang out with. We miss him. We miss him as a friend, and it's one of the reasons that we wanted to do something to keep his memory alive and to celebrate his life. So we're hopeful that this talk and the bursaries that come out of the funds that we help raise will keep his memory alive.
No question. Neville would be so thrilled to know that through this fund that's been created in his name, students will receive bursaries. The Neville Gilfoy Talk will become an annual event. It will grow in magnitude, undoubtedly, and to match his magnanimous personality.
So just to conclude, we hope that you enjoyed the first Neville Gilfoy Talk, and we'll return each year to this innovative way of keeping him in our memory. Have a great day.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, John and Jim. That was great. It's nice to get that kind of personal opening, I think, for the session today. And now I'm going to introduce you to each of the panelists. Let me start by asking Tom to tell you a bit about himself.
Hi, everyone. My name is Tom Hickey. I'm originally from Glace Bay. Graduated from Dalhousie Engineering a few years ago, many more than a few. I had the benefit of going to the face-to-face conferences, and we'll talk about that a little, but it was a big help to me in my first few years in business. I guess to define myself, I'd say I'm the startup guy. I've done 23 startups since I've left university. I've ranged in business from safety, which was my first one. I sold that in 2012 and ended up with 26 locations across North America and about 900 employees. But from there, I was into road construction and still am, land development, refrigeration, medical clinics. The list goes on. The only thing I'm addicted to, I think, is variety in my business. Anyway, that's a little about me. It's really happy to be here. And I think if it was done a little later in the day in honor of Neville, I would have had a martini to cheers things off, but it's a little early for that.
Thanks, Tom. Let me ask Matthew to come and say a few things about himself.
Thanks so much, Kim. Hi, everyone. Matthew Martel. I'm the Chief Operating Officer at the BBI. I'm also a Dalhousie Management alumni and currently sit on the Faculty's Advisory Board, which has been a wonderful experience so far. I'm extremely passionate about entrepreneurship, particularly entrepreneurship as it pertains to underrepresented founders. And some of the work that we do through the BBI is really where we're shifting the economic needle in the Black community through training, mentorship, entrepreneurial services. And really, we're celebrating our 25th anniversary this year, and we're really just continuing to scratch the surface and make significant impact in the community. So hearing Tom's stories about Neville is great, and even since being asked to do this talk, I've heard so many great stories that I feel disadvantaged to have not had the opportunity to meet him. But I have a strong feeling that through today, I'm going to hear even more stories about the things that he's done and the lives that he's touched. So I feel extremely grateful to be able to be a part of this today. Thanks.
Thanks, Matt. I feel like we're in the same boat, so we'll be educated today together. Julia, why don't you come and say a few things about yourself?
Hi, Kim. Hi, everyone. Thanks for having me. Thanks, Dalhousie and Jim and Dawn and Neville's family for offering this stage to talk about innovation and entrepreneurship. I came to Nova Scotia because I was told this is where you need to be the best. So I was a come from away, came for the sport of canoe kayak. And after retiring at the age of 24, I decided that I would go into business, and really it was brand new. I had no experience, no connections. And it's funny because Neville was there from the beginning for me. And it's really incredible when you're given a hand up early on. And so I'm so thrilled to be here today to talk a little bit about that. So I've owned and operated 4 tech startups. Currently, I'm the CEO and co-founder of Eyeread. So we deliver literacy education through video games kids love. And we're used in 160 countries by over 3 million students. And thanks so much.
Amazing. Cool. Thanks, Julia. All right, Dennis.
Kim, good morning, everybody. My name is Dennis Campbell, and I'm really, really thrilled and delighted and honored to be here today to take part in honoring Neville and perhaps maybe giving some other entrepreneurs some ideas. You're going to see a few little teasers that I'm not really going to speak too much about right now. I'll refer to them later on in the Q&A if time permits. But I show the power of persistence because Neville was big on persistence, and he taught me a lot about it. I thought I knew a lot. He taught me a lot more about it and how effective it was. Also, Neville was always after me to wear my kilt. We were the company with the kilts. We are the company with the kilts. But every time I didn't have my kilt, Neville was always, "Where the heck is your kilt?" Or actually, "Where the hell's your kilt?" I want to tell you one quick little story about Neville that was really, truly transformational in my life. Neville, he had such a unique and uncanny way of connecting and developing friendships and with customers that became lifelong friends. And for me, one day he knew I was very frustrated in business. I was running the company for, since I started it at that point, 20 years previous when I started in high school. The company was growing like mad. And, I was not very good at running the company. I came to realize I was very good at building a company, but I was not very good at ever really making any money with the company. And Neville knew this. And Neville said to me one day, "I'd like to have a meeting with you and your business partners." And my 2 business partners at the time, who were great guys, they're still dear friends today. We sat down in our boardroom with Neville, and Neville said, "Guys," he put his arms out on the boardroom table. We thought he was going to sell us some more advertising. And he put his hands on the table and he said, fellas, which one or two of you knuckleheads is leaving and which knucklehead is staying? And we all were shocked. And we said, what are you talking about? And he said, this business can't run the way it's running. You guys need a real operator. You got to figure this out. And literally within a few seconds, I put my hand up and I said, I'll go, because I was just exhausted. And Neville, my partners, looked at me and said, you can't go. We're 10 and 15 years older than you. You're the young guy. You need to stay. And the discussion went on. And by the time Neville left the room, we had a very amicable, back of the napkin sort of deal for me to buy my partners out over time. And, Neville had a smirk on his face walking out of the room and said, Denny, he says, you're not going anywhere. You're just going to grow this business. And it was transformational in my life. And that's just one example of what Neville did for me, because it was life-changing. And I owe him so much, and I miss him dearly.
Awesome. That's a great introduction, and what a neat way to set the scene for the rest of the conversation we're about to have. So you'll see that the rest of the panelists are coming back to join me. Let me start by lobbing you out a first question, and I'll ask anyone who wants to jump in on it to do so. It's clear from the introductions that you've offered that Neville was an innovative person and an amazing mentor. Maybe I'd ask you to tell us a little bit about the importance of innovation in kind of an entrepreneurial activities, and if you like, a little bit about some of the important drivers of innovation-focused businesses.
I can take that, Kim. Just take.
Thanks, Julia.
I've thought a lot about this question, and there's so many things that make a successful, innovative business. A lot of things have to go right, but I think two main things that I think Neville actually reflected really, really well. One is being really bold, being globally minded about what you can do. And he always looked at Atlantic Canada as being a pocket of real excellence, whether he was talking about oceans or innovation or whatever it was. And so I think that boldness is really important, to get out of pocket and to work with people who are the best in the world, and to bring that back home and to help lift our environment of business. So that was one thing. And then obviously connections. He was the king at building relationships, and relationships have proven to be kind of ultimately the reason I've been able to see any success. And so I really, I think that those two things are good things to bring up, just because I think Neville represented them so much.
What about you, Tom?
Really interesting question. And I thought about the question a lot too, so I'm going to start early and end up late. My first business was safety, and we were offshore oil and gas safety. And we'd invested a ton of money, more than I had. So thanks to the banks at that point, in growing the offshore industry for ourselves, to find out that they didn't hit any more gas offshore Nova Scotia. So with respect to innovation, we hired a bunch of MBA students. We did market research around the world to see where the fastest growing offshore oil and gas markets were. And within probably 18 months, we set up an office in Brazil, signed a contract with Petrobras, and worked there for 5 years. So that's the type of creative innovation. And I guess to fast forward to today, I love all the tech industries that are out there. I play a little bit in the space, but I'm sure not an expert there. But I've got a refrigeration business. I've got a road construction business. And what we've tried to do there is add tech into what I'd call old business. So the innovation now, we've gone paperless. So all of our meetings, all of our inspections, everything is done now wirelessly, with some pain. But that's innovation in old industries new. So just two examples of kind of how to tie innovation in with some old school businesses too. And I think there's big opportunities there.
Thanks, Tom. I always like to hear we hired some MBA students. You know what I mean? Better if you have Dal in front of MBA students, but still. How about I turn it to you, Matt?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So again, not having met Neville, I get the feeling and the vibe that a pandemic like this, just ripe with opportunity, would have been a really great time to have a mentor like him to help guide startups. But in the work that we do with BBI, we've seen a lot of innovative companies just make some really strong pivots here through the pandemic, including Smooth Meal Prep and Vanity Fashions, to name a couple. And really, I think that's what it's about is, no one's ever really going to know, what's next or what's on the horizon, but it's just important to remain agile as a business, and be prepared to take advantage of those opportunities. And of course, being Canadian, we always hear that Gretzky quote, and his success was not because he chased pucks, but instead anticipated where they would be. And I think that's the attitude that founders in Nova Scotia or Canada and abroad all need to share.
Dennis,
Thanks,
jump
Kim.
in.
All right, you bet. The slides that you saw early on there were good examples of innovation. Some were innovative a long time ago, and some are innovative today. But the key to young people starting out as entrepreneurs is to try new and different things, and try lots of things. Some things will work, some things won't. But you won't know if you don't try. And along the way, that's one of the things we did. We've tried so many things, and you find some real gems in there. And so, like the postcard example, which was very innovative at the time, was kind of unheard of to use postcards in mail. It was always in an envelope for business. We were told we couldn't break the cruise ship market, and we used postcards over almost 2 years, one a month, to this over and over with different messages, and we managed to crack an industry and believe it or not, gain almost 60% of an industry we were told we couldn't get by simply using postcards. And I tell that story because Neville loved that story, and he had me tell it a couple of times actually, face to face over the years. But the other two things that you saw there, send out cards. There's lots of online card systems. But that one, I sent Lori a card that she'll get actually today or tomorrow. I sent it a week ago from my iPhone, and with my own handwriting, because my handwriting is in the system, and it's customized with Neville's great face and and a really nice message. And the other one was you can print a message on a Guinness beer, and so you saw that I printed Neville's face on a Guinness beer at the Old Triangle. You can do so many fun and unique things as a way to connect and be innovative. And even though Neville wasn't a techie guy, boy, was he innovative.
Cool. Dennis, I'm going to ask you to keep going because you alluded to the face-to-face conference there, and I want to ask a little bit more about what that was. How important was it to you as a younger entrepreneur? And Tom, I'll ask you to jump in when Dennis is done too to get your thoughts.
Sure, Kim, thanks. I got to tell you, when I think back on that, I remember driving to PEI with Neville in the backseat, Max Brennan, Neville Gilfoy, and I, and we went over for a couple meetings on the island. And on the way back, Neville talked about this concept of a new conference called Face to Face, and where business people and entrepreneurs would connect and share ideas with great speakers and have some fun. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "Yeah, no, not a very good idea." And he said, "Why?" And I said, "Wow, Neville." I said, "There's so many conferences out there today." And I said, there's just too many conferences, and there's just so much time that everyone has. Of course, I had a young family and a growing business. And, thank God Neville didn't listen to me. He went for it, and he wouldn't take no for an answer. He made sure that I was at every face-to-face, almost every one. And when I went to that conference, it was almost euphoria to me because it was so incredibly valuable. The connections I made with other entrepreneurs, but, with real, like some of the top people in business in Atlantic Canada, I could never get that otherwise. And one of the biggest deals I ever did came out of going to face-to-face. And so it was just, I so miss it, like I miss Neville. And I really hope that someday, somehow, someone will bring back Neville's face-to-face again.
Yeah, we're all desperate for that, aren't we, Dennis? Tom,
Yeah.
Jump in.
I think it's ironic today to be called the face-to-face conference with us all on Zoom here. But one of the things for me, I guess, and I wrote a note down, I was in my second year of business when I went to the conference, and I said it was a golden opportunity as a young entrepreneur to meet very successful business leaders that you would never have the opportunity to cross paths with. And you'd meet them casually with drinks, and learn. And so it was, for those on the call that don't know, it was basically a business gathering for entrepreneurs with some formality, but it was very, very casual. And I can tell you, the nights were late. So we literally had fun. And I think that's where I met Dennis and a lot of other friends that had been business associates and good friends with me for a long, long time. So number one, we missed Neville, but number two, we missed the conference for sure. It added real value.
So Dennis and Tom, you've talked a bit about being young entrepreneurs and what sort of helped in your path to the success you've had now. Maybe I can ask Matt and Julia to sort of reflect on what we think, what advice would you give young entrepreneurs that are starting out in this challenging era?
Yeah, so I can start, and I guess I'll start by mentioning something Julia stated earlier, and it's that attitude of being bold. I think significant at this time. Right now, the chaos and uncertainty that we see, I think is a huge opportunity for entrepreneurs if they are bold, if they are, leading with an attitude of disruption. We're seeing significant retirements. The timelines have expedited opportunities for young people to purchase businesses and just add a layer of innovation into a business that maybe has been traditional for a little bit too long is significant, and recognize that we're probably not going to go back to the old ways. We hear the new normal every single day. So let's think about what does 2021, 2025 look like, and find a great mentor like Neville if you can. Maybe not shoot that high. I think it's a target. Puts a lot of pressure on people, but I think strong mentors is extremely important. And just being bold.
Yeah, I think, Kim, what I would add to that is that it's hard. Being an entrepreneur is not an easy road to take. Being an innovative entrepreneur means that there's this added element of pace. You have to move quickly. And I think one of the things that comes with that is a pressure to feel like you have to be rushing through things. And that can be at the expense of really being in the moment in terms of your conversations with people, in terms of building those relationships. And what I would recommend to young entrepreneurs coming up is to not feel so rushed, to just put one foot in front of the other and understand that the attention that you're giving the moment or the conversation or the action that you're doing is really going to be compounded over time if you can give it that focus. And I've missed so many moments because I've been rushing too quickly. And so that, I think that would be my main piece of advice.
Oh, that's great advice, Julia. Tom or Dennis, do you want to jump in on this?
Julia, just to your comment, I guess it's mirroring it almost. The one comment I say for people starting out is do your homework. Get your research done. It's so, I don't want to say easy today, but there's lots of opportunity to become entrepreneurs today, which is great. But before you jump in, do your homework on what you're going to get into. Make sure there's a market for it. Study it as hard as you can. And I think the second thing I would say, with so much talk about mental health, if you can't, or if you have challenges with stress, think really hard, because it's not easy and it's a high stress job. And so I put that out there just as a cautious reminder for folks that it's stressful. So if you can manage stress, go for it. If not, you really want to think hard about it.
Dennis.
My advice would be, when you're feeling down or lonely as an entrepreneur, because it's extremely rewarding, but you don't get to the rewarding without some lonely times. And when you're feeling down and lonely as an entrepreneur, do not listen to yourself, because your inner voice can often talk you out of some great ideas or talk you down about, what you can or can't do. And so, I like to say, speak to yourself or speak to others when you're feeling down to get that energy and power to make sure you don't talk yourself out of good ideas or good direction. I literally talked myself out of kilted tour guides. I thought, it must not be a good idea, because if it was, someone would have done it by now. It was the 80s. All the good ideas were taken, or so I thought. So as strange as it sounds, speak to yourself. And like sometimes if you ever see me driving down the road, sometimes I'll be singing, but sometimes I am just speaking to myself, and I'm talking to myself like a positive coach saying, Campbell, you can do it. And crazy as that sounds, you have to speak to yourself.
So let me ask Julia, you said something interesting in your introduction when you talked a bit about coming to the region to pursue excellence. And I think that's a great narrative, and I want to hang on to that and have us think a bit more about that, because, you know, one of the things that culturally sometimes that frustrates me about the Atlantic region is, you know, a kind of apprehension about being great or about sort of singing some of the fabulous things of the region. So can I ask anyone who wants to jump in to talk a little bit about you know, why entrepreneurship matters in the Atlantic region? What is it? What are entrepreneurs bringing to the region? Sort of talk a little bit, connect a little bit the story you've been threading out about the importance of entrepreneurial thinking, entrepreneurship, innovation, and root it in, I guess, the Atlantic region conversation.
I'll take it quickly, just because I started that. I was shocked that there was any attitude that we weren't the best in the world when I came, because I was told. Actually, I was told Dartmouth was the place to be if you want to be the best in the world. And so when I understood later that there was a bit of a culture of maybe not feeling like we were the best in the world, I was just shocked. And I've seen it so many times in so many industries here that we really do we punch above our weight, and we have to be so proud of that. Getting ready for this talk, I was watching some YouTubes of Neville speaking at conferences down in Bangor, Maine, and he was unapologetic. Like, it was beautiful to watch that passion about this place and about what was happening. And Tom, he had done his homework. He knew what everyone had done with specificity, and he could tell those stories so beautifully. And I think we should all be doing that. We all need to do that for one another, because there's so many amazing things happening here.
Dennis, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, thanks so much. You know, Neville, as Julia said, Neville taught us so well about how to think of Atlantic Canada. You know, some of you would remember he talked about Atlantica, and that's all becoming one and being so much more powerful. And I truly believe someday, maybe not in our lifetime, but someday it will happen. It should happen. But you know what? Small business and entrepreneurship, it's the lifeblood of Atlantic Canada and our economy, and that's our communities. And that's why it's so important that each one of us who are entrepreneurs, you know, just go for it and make it happen, and do it with that positive attitude that we are the best in the world, because we are.
Cool. We're going to take a couple questions from the audience, but before I do that, let me see if either Matthew or Tom wants to jump in on this.
Sure. I you know, it's a tough one to not want to make a comment on. I absolutely agree that you know, Nova Scotia is the best province. I grew up in Cape Breton, you know, and I think one of the things for me was feelings of needing to, you know, step away for bigger opportunities. So every time that I see, you know, significant opportunities here in the province, it's extremely motivating to know that, you know, I can stay. You know, peers can stay, and even future children, future generations are supported here as well.
One first. Maybe I'll put you on the spot, Dennis. Go for it.
Well, I tell this one because this is one that Neville would often ask me to tell if we were out having a couple of drinks with new people that hadn't heard it. But he'd say, Dennis, tell the story of when you found out that you were actually a pimp. And I won't go into great detail about that. It wasn't very fun at the time, but after the fact, it was funny in the fact I inadvertently hired a prostitute to work for us as a tour guide. And Neville thought that was the funniest story he ever heard. And so he said, technically, Campbell, you are a pimp. It was a challenge, but we overcame it. It wasn't fun at the time when I realized what had happened, but you get over it.
Dennis, I'm not going to be able to top that one. But I don't mind jumping in. I would say one of the biggest ones for me is most of the businesses I get into with partners. And I think it's knowing expectations up front for what you're bringing to the table and what your partner brings to the table. And I think writing them down so that 2 years from now, whether the business is up or down, you can sit down and say, okay, I'm here to support, but that falls under your hat. So for startups, I'd really say line out who's responsible for what. One of the comments in our office is, you want one throat to choke. And I know it sounds aggressive, but there's a lot to be said in it.
Just from a mom's perspective, I made the mistake of letting guilt drive me for too long. I'm a mom of 4. I've been an entrepreneur since my kids were very little, and for a long time I felt very guilty about dividing time. And when I was able to get over that hurdle, everything became better. So just not wasting the energy on those types of emotions that are just so non-productive is something that I've learned.
Matthew, do you want in on this one? You've never made a mistake. It's possible.
So I'll go back to I think a comment Tom made on the preparation. I've certainly made my share of mistakes in business as well as just general work and stretching myself. But I think that research and preparation, I've definitely had situations where I've seen a couple folks, tackle a certain type of business and think that, if they're doing well, then there must be a good market and I can do well. But the adequate research was certainly not there. So I've felt that sting a couple times for sure. So I do what I can now to kind of encourage young entrepreneurs, especially to do just that. And, we do have a culture of, fail fast and make mistakes, but let's try to minimize them as much as we possibly can.
All right, let's take another question from the audience. Here's a question from Ken. How do you provide conditions for young innovators, leaders to succeed in your area of business, whether it's internships or actually onboarding of new employees? What do you do to ensure the initial experience is motivating? Oh, that's a great question, Ken. Thank you.
I'll actually jump in there if you want. I
Sure.
think that's a great question, is right. And I think as entrepreneurs, we can do a little bit more work on the front end of that challenge. I think, lining the right people up with the company and making sure values and culture are all in line is a thing to do. But that's when I'd suggested we probably need to communicate more with the young innovators and get their inputs on what they want to see at our offices. One of the things we've learned a lot is just on work-life balance. And I think for us, and I'm officially now an older entrepreneur, it's been really educational to understand that there's new requirements for the person that's coming in, and we better understand it or they're not going to be with us. So we've done a lot of stuff there.
Yeah, we've had so many amazing co-op students from Dal.
Nice. Thank you for the connection there at the end, Julia.
The most amazing computer science co-ops you're going to get. So I think one of the things that we focused on in our company in terms of culture, Tom, is high performance. So we bring in people who are high performance players who we see that out of the gate in them. But along with that comes trust. And when I talk to a new employee who joins our team, and I talk to every single co-op, I let them know that they're coming in with our full trust. They don't have to build it. They have it completely, and we wouldn't have hired them otherwise. And that gives them a confidence to be able to have the autonomy to bring in new ideas, which it's just incredible. The co-ops we've had have just been such great high performers, and we've had so much from them. So I think building that sense in them that they can take on really exciting opportunities is so important.
Matthew or Dennis, either of you want in on that?
Matthew, go ahead.
Okay, sure. Yeah, I'll say for young entrepreneurs, we one of the composite group entities that we have at BBI is called Businesses Jam, and it's basically a platform for young entrepreneurs and people who are interested in entrepreneurship to really explore it as a career opportunity, build networks, and just learn some of the hard skills that are required for entrepreneurship. But it's worked very well because it also helps us recognize some of the really interesting ideas and attitudes of youth who are looking towards entrepreneurship that we can use to support our larger, entrepreneurial clients and kind of match them in entrepreneurs as well as some of the quote unquote older entrepreneurs, because both groups, of course, have a lot to offer. So I think anytime we can create intentional spaces to allow people to explore entrepreneurship, we benefit. We've just launched a project with Volta, and the focus in that project was on LGBTQ Black and Indigenous founders, and the response has been overwhelming. And it just goes to show that there's such an interest in having that space and having that safe place to really explore that as an opportunity. So the more we can do that, I think we'll be much better off. I'm seeing huge improvements in the province, but we certainly can't stop here.
Awesome. Thanks, Matthew. We've got time maybe for another question from the audience. Dennis, while they put it up, do you want to weigh in on that last one?
Yeah, sure. As an entrepreneur, we have a very entrepreneurial culture internally, and when we onboard co-op students, we explain to them that's an important part of our culture. And we've had many co-op students, many great Dal co-op students as well, that actually have ended up becoming longtime employees. We pride ourselves on a great corporate culture, but being entrepreneurial, we encourage them, if they want to go out and become an entrepreneur, we'll help them do that. And that's happened. We've had several co-op students become entrepreneurs. They get excited about it, and they become great partners and suppliers of ours over the years. And it's really neat to see that microcosm happen, and to be part of fostering these young entrepreneurs become really experienced entrepreneurs.
Yeah. All right, here's a question from Aftab. As entrepreneurs, when do you make the call to go to the overseas market? It might look good, but there's major liability issues. I mean, Tom, why don't I put this on you first, since you've raised a few of them, and then Julia, see if you have reflections, and then open it up to Dennis and Matthew if you feel like it.
Sure. I can kind of bounce back to one of the questions too, which was about mistakes you made. So I actually worked a fair bit overseas, Saudi Arabia, Doha, and Russia, Caspian Sea. Mentioned Brazil and Mexico, and I think the first thing I would say is confirm the market is there. So make sure there's something you're providing that isn't already there, because if there's someone locally doing it and they're doing a really good job, you might think it's a good idea, but it's a big investment. That would be number one. Number two for me would be back to doing your homework. Understand the culture. I think coming from Glace Bay and moving to Halifax, there was a culture change. And so culture is real, and you just have to respect it and understand how you fit in. One of the things we missed on our research in Brazil was corruption. And when we were down there, it was rampant everywhere. So we were, through the Canadian consulate, arrived with products in Brazil and had to figure out, as a Canadian from Nova Scotia, what do I do with corruption in a country as big as Brazil? So if I'd known that now, I definitely wouldn't have went. And so it was 5 years in Brazil. We didn't make money at the end of it. And so looking back, if, like I said, really do your homework on the markets.
Thanks, Tom. Julia?
I agree with everything Tom said. I might just add, one of the best pieces of advice I was given just about market and go-to-market, and this applies to all markets, not just overseas markets, but I think you have to really be deliberate about looking for where the pull is. So pushing is never as successful as feeling the pull from the market. So, and that's something that we've done, is we've looked at where we have concentrated interest in what we're doing, and we've focused on there very, very deliberately and with discipline, rather than trying to just make a market. And I think that's just an important piece of advice, kind of more generally speaking. It just makes life a lot easier.
I know we've got another question from the audience queued up, so maybe I'll ask that we shift to it, and I'm going to start by putting, yeah, there we go, perfect. I'm going to start by putting both Matthew and Dennis on the spot on this one. So what silver linings have each of you discovered from the pandemic? Thanks for the question, Eric.
Matthew, you want to go first?
Sure. So something that I already mentioned that I think is the big one is the huge opportunities that come as a result of chaos and uncertainty, I guess we can say. I think a lot of businesses in the province, the founders were nearing retirement. The need to put significant innovation and make significant changes to their business model. I really don't think the need, or not that the need wasn't there, but I don't think, to Julia's point, the pull to make that change was there. But since this has happened, I think, it's really opened the eyes of a lot of founders, a lot of organizations, even for very simple technological changes. And, it's been extremely eye-opening in terms of what the market is looking for, what is consumer behavior doing these days. So I think for founders, the opportunities to, say, purchase businesses, at really, really, great prices and really great returns if they have the ability to manage and inject that level of innovation into the business. I think that opportunity is significant.
So I'm going to go out on a limb here. I'm going to channel my inner Neville, because Neville was very good at going out on a limb and sharing like nobody would share. The silver lining of the pandemic has been very profound for me. In the springtime, April, May last year, when the world was shut down and we had no visibility on vaccines or what the future held, I've never been so stressed or had so many sleepless nights in my life. And although our lenders were fantastic and they said, Dennis, relax, we're going to stand by you. You've got a good company with a good, strong balance sheet. I literally, realized that our company, which I had built my entire life, went from being very valuable to worthless. And, I said to my wife, I said, I think it's time that we sell our house. And she said, I don't want to sell our house. And I said, I'm sorry, you make 99% of the decisions. But I said, this is not a discussion or a negotiation. I said, we have to. I said, because if this thing goes down, because we have no idea how long this is going to go on. If this goes down, it'll be like a house of cards. And I said, and you and I will be out on the street. And I said, I'm just so thankful that our kids are now in the early 20s and they don't depend on us. But I said, we have to do something, because I said, my name is tied to many millions of dollars and our company is worthless. And the incredible thing, our bankers were true to the word. We've been able to, with a lot of effort, secure the company for the long term, and we're now ready. But we moved into an apartment. I've never lived in an apartment my entire life, and I've realized I love apartment living. There's no stress, no hassle, and I'm right by Murphy, so I can get that work-life balance. And anyway, it's just incredible to see what, as Matthew said, what out of this pandemonium, what good things can come from it. And I could go on and on ad nauseum, but I asked my wife a couple weeks ago, I said, if you could go back and change it, put ourselves back in our family home, would you? And she said, absolutely not. And I would agree.
Thanks. So let me turn to the last question, which is, what's the most important lesson that you've learned from your journey? And I'll ask you to use this as a chance to sort of have any final reflections you want to have on this fabulous panel, and then we'll wrap up this part of the panel, and there'll be a couple of more things to wrap up the rest of the session. So Julia, why don't I ask you to step in first?
Yeah, I'm gonna take it, and I'm gonna say two things. The first will be to Tom's comment earlier, just about kind of the stress and mental health of it all. To be able to learn how to manage the highs and lows, to be able to keep some kind of level of consistent stress, because it's not so bad, but also health at the same time. That's been one of the things that I think it's been the most important lesson, and one that I'm glad I've learned. But the other, and this relates to Neville directly, is the power of storytelling. And if you can tell your own story in a way that you are bold and passionate, it can be so incredible. And one of the things, I just wished I had the opportunity to thank Neville. I just remember, as an early entrepreneur in my early 20s, no connections, nothing to give Neville. I had nothing valuable to offer him. He would just stop into my office, this little dingy office in Bears Lake, and he would talk to me. And I felt so lucky. Like, I felt like, oh my gosh, he sees my potential. And he would really listen to my story. And sometimes he'd even promote my story. And what I realized when I was doing kind of my watching those YouTube videos and reading the articles before this talk was that he did that for everyone. Like, he made everybody feel so special because he really was interested and he really listened to the stories and he took those in and then he promoted those stories. And I just am so grateful because without those the hand up that you get, and you get it here in Atlantic Canada, I think more than anywhere else in the world, I just never would have been able to see the success. So yeah, so thanks, Neville.
Awesome. Thank you, Julia. Tom, why don't you jump in?
I think for me, the biggest lesson learned over the pandemic, it's not necessarily business related because I think we've seen a lot of businesses affected differently. But it was actually more tourism related. And I saw parts of Eastern Canada I've never been to. And literally I've had the opportunity to go to spots that I probably, as you get to travel more, you wouldn't even have considered. So that would probably be my silver lining. With respect to the business side of things, I just think it's important for me. We've never had to lay off people, which I'm really, really proud to say. And I think when I take on the ownership of being an entrepreneur, I feel responsible for the families that you're feeding. And so with all of the doom and gloom that's come, that hits pretty hard, and how you manage, back to the stress thing. Some of those things, when you're home at night and you have food in front of you, you affect a lot of lives for this and culture and everything. So just take it for real. It's the real deal.
Thanks, Tom. Matthew.
Yeah, for me, it's the importance of strong support systems. I've found, my ability to kind of build that support system, whether it comes to, mental health or mentorship. There's so many, I guess, areas of your life that having strong supports is important. So you do feel a bit more confident taking that entrepreneurial leap, and giving yourself that opportunity to learn and figure things out without, significant worry. So that's been important for me, whether I've, launched a little business or whether I've, moved from government to private or to not-for-profit. Each one of those things, of course, has its own risks. But just knowing that I have that support system, I have that network that I can bounce ideas off of or bring unique challenges that I'm having to has really helped me along the way. So that's what I would say is a big one for me, and would encourage others to constantly develop that support system.
Dennis, we'll give you the last word of this part, at least, of today's session.
Thanks so much. What I've learned is the absolute severe or significant importance of treating people well, really, really treating them well, and have fun along the way. But something, again, I'll go out on a limb here and say that when I went through that tough time early on in the pandemic, when I thought everything was going to crash down around me, I experienced a mental pain that I've never experienced in my life before. And I learned through that process that, to when you feel that, go get help. And I did. And my GP was able to give me a quick little test. And she told me that I was, for the first time in my life, I was diagnosed with mild depression. And she said, Dennis, it doesn't go from 0 to 60 at once, but it can go quickly. Mm-hmm. And so, I got medication. It was a new medication that, was amazing. And within 5 days, I started to feel like my old self. And then, 6 months later, I weaned myself off. And I know from that experience that if that ever happens again, I will seek help right away. I won't wait too long. And I share that with all of you because, it's, as we all know, we need to talk about it, as Matthew said. And if others hear that story, maybe they'll go get help when they start to feel a pain they've never felt before.
Dennis, what a great story, because I kind of almost feel like there's a Neville moment in there. I could sort of imagine, connecting it with the story where he sat you down and said, like, what's going on, man? Like, let's work this out, and so kind of taking seriously the problems as you find them, and then, not sort of hiding things or shying away from actually confronting things directly and knowing that you can get through them. There's something really lovely about the stories that you've told about him that give us a bit of a feel of who he was as a person. So thank you. So I'm going to come back and thank the panel again in a minute. We're going to get a chance to come back and say goodbye to the audience, but we want to share 2 videos with you before we do that. The first of them is a thank you message from one of 2 Neville Gilfoy bursary recipients from Warwick, Chapanurak, I think, and then we'll have a message from Jamie Gilfoy, and then we'll be returning to say a final goodbye to everybody. So stick with us. We'll see you in a couple minutes.
Hi, my name is Pamrita Chapanurak. I'm currently a second-year management student at Dalhousie University. I'm pursuing 2 majors right now. The first one is entrepreneurship and innovation. The second one is the economics. With this financial support, I think it's very helpful to me and my family. Since during this pandemic situation, my family have been through a lot of tough situation. So with this financial support, I can focus more on my study and like less of family financially. And lastly, I'm very grateful for like the financial support, and I will keep up my good work for the rest of like the year at Dalhousie. So, thank you.
That was great. So what a heartfelt short video. So we're going to do one more, I think, before we come back to say a final goodbye. Let me turn it over to Jamie.
Hi, I'm Jamie Gilfoy. I'm the president of Aquatext Translation Services and Neville Gilfoy's son. On behalf of my entire family, I'd like to thank everybody involved in making this amazing event a huge success. It's really a true honor and a privilege to see Neville's legacy preserved and carried on like this. Neville and I both graduated from the Dal Arts program and probably spent a bit too much time goofing around in the sub during that time. I worked at Progress for many years before taking the leap to start my own business almost a decade ago. Neville mentored and inspired many people, myself included. I'm quite sure I wouldn't have become an entrepreneur if it weren't for Neville. He loved Atlantic Canada, and he really believed that it was possible to succeed and grow here in the region without having to leave. So I'm pretty sure I was supposed to talk about how much this event means to my family today, and to be clear, it means more than I could possibly explain to all of us. Really, it's huge. But in a classic Neville move, I'm going to go off program here today and instead tell you 3 lessons that I learned from Neville in the many years I got to spend both living and working with him. So the first thing is that if you have a dream, you have to go after it. Neville didn't have a business education. He didn't come from money. He didn't really even have any money. And if we're being honest, he didn't even do particularly well in school. But he had a dream. He was focused. He believed, even when no one else believed in him. And even when all the odds were stacked against him, he just knew that this is what he had to do, and he kept pushing. And it wasn't just some big magical thing that happened overnight. It really, I think, boiled down to more constantly pushing, taking one step at a time, and just going forward. And really, he did